We're gonna get started. Okay, တကယ်ချင်းနေဟိုကိုတည့်ရသူတွေ join နေသူရှိရင်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ပြောပေးပါနော်စတော့မယ်လို့ဟုတ်ကဲ့အချင်း10 minute ကျော်သွားပြီဆိုတော့နော်အားလုံးကြိုဆိုပါတယ် Good evening ဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျွန်တော်တို့ကျေးဇူးပြုပြီးတော့ mute လုပ်လို့ရအောင်လားမသိဘူးနော်ချုပ် Okay hope ကျွန်တော်lesson 2ကနေအားလုံးကြိုဆိုတယ်ကျွန်တော် Lainatna Education ပေါ့နော်ဟိုနည်းနည်းပြောရခဲ့တယ်ဆိုတော့ Lainatna ပေါ့နော်ဟို syllable 3ခုရှိတယ် education ဗမာလို့ဆိုတော့ Guyana education ပေါ့နော်ကျွန်တော်တို့ကတော့ဒီလို online course တွေဟိုပေးတယ်ပြီးကြတော့ပညာရေးနဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးတော့ဘဟုတုတဟိုသူတေသနာဟိုသတင်းအစုံပေါ့နော်အဲ့ဒါတွေကိုလည်းကျွန်တော် online နေ post လုပ်ပါတယ်နော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့အဲ့ဒါကြောင့်ဟိုအဲ့လိုမျိုးစိတ်ဝင်စားမဲ့သူရှိရင်ကျွန်တော်တို့ရဲ့ page ကို like ပေးကြပါ follow လုပ်ပေးကြပါနော်ဒီနေ့reading that
good evening, folks. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And I'm calling in from Rochester, New York, where it is the morning here, but I'm so happy to be with you all. So as teacher Kai just explained, there's a couple things that we needed you all to kind of do in preparation for today. Our hope was that we were going to put it up on the screen in advance.
Okay ခုနသူဆရာနေပြောတော့လို့ပေါ့နော်ကျွန်တော်ဒီဇာတ်လေးကိုကူးပေးကြပါနော်မကူးသေးတဲ့သူတွေရှိရင်ကူးပေးကြပါပြီးကြရင်ဟိုပထမနေ့ကလာတဲ့သူတွေတော့လည်းဒါကူးပြီးသားပါနော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ဒီဇာတ်လေးကိုကျေးဇူးပြုလို့ကူးပေးကြပါဟုတ်ကဲ့
Okay, so hopefully you have a pen and paper in hand and that you've spent some time building out these two charts, one on the front side of the piece of paper and one on the back side, because we're going to need them for the two exercises that we'll be going through this evening.
Okay, ကျွန်တော်တို့ဒီခုနpen နဲ့ဟိုခဲတဲ့နဲ့မိုးနဲ့ဘောပင်နဲ့စာလေးရှင်းကောင်းပါမယ်ကျွန်တော်ဒီဇာတ်လေးကိုတောင်းတော့မှာဖြစ်ပါတယ်ဒီနေ့
So Nick, sorry, last time I was in charge of the chat, so I'm just gonna facilitate that again.
Yeah, please.
Someone is saying that they cannot hear.
Oh. Can't hear me. Okay, Tay say ကျွန်တော်မကြားရဘူးဟလားဟိုကြားပြီလားကြားပြီဟုတ်ကဲ့လက်ညှိုးလေးထောင်ပေးပါကြားရင် Okay
Just real quick check-in, can everyone understand Sia Nick and Sia Kai okay? You can give a thumbs up or write in the chat.
Okay ကျွန်တော်ပြောတာနားလည်လက်ညှိုးလေးထောင်ပေးပါနော်အားလုံး Okay မောင်လည်း chat box မှာနားလည်ချောင်းအားလေးပြောပေးပါ Okay
I see some we're good to go.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
They'll
Great.
tell us if
Okay, sounds good. So we're going to keep rolling on here, folks. Sorry for that. It's just part of the virtual space. So any good lesson starts with an agenda, and we want to make sure that you all understand exactly the roadmap that we're going to be taking here this evening in getting through this literacy lesson. So as you can see here, we have it all broken down for you all to review. We're going to do introductions, which was just done. And then we're going to be moving into exploring two different literacy techniques that are really powerful and starting to break down some of the paragraphs that you all very well may be starting to engage with in preparation for the IELTS or in your own English language learning.
Okay, ကျွန်တော်တို့ဟိုပထမနေ့ကလိုပဲဒီ agenda လေးပေးထားပါတယ်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ introduction တော့ပြီးသွားပြီဒါပေမဲ့ဟိုဒုတိယကတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့ဟိုပထမနေ့အတိုင်းပဲကျွန်တော်ဟို technique တစ်ခုသင်မယ်နော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ brainstorming လုပ်မယ်ပြီးတော့ text coding လုပ်မယ်နော်ကျွန်တော် reading comprehension အတွက်အရင်ရေးချက်အရာလေးဖြစ်တယ်
So following demonstration of these two techniques, I'll be doing a review of them, and then you'll also get a chance to do a little bit of practice. And after that practice, you'll then be able to do some of your own independent work with these two tools that we will all as a group kind of review together. And then finally, following that practice and the group review, we're going to do a title review where you get to guess the title of the passage that we've been reading, and then we'll close things out and get a little bit of feedback from you all.
Okay ကျွန်တော်အဲ့ဒါခုန technique တစ်ခုသင်ပေးသွားပြီးကျွန်တော် review လုပ်မယ်ပြီးကြတော့ ကိုယ့်အနေကိုပေါ့နော်အားလုံးဒီအတင်နာတဲ့တင်တဲ့ independent work ပေါ့နော်အဲ့ဒါလုပ်မယ်paragraph ကိုအသုံးပြီးတော့နောက်ဆုံးအဲ့ဒါပြီးရင်ကျွန်တော်တို့ဒီ paragraph ဖတ်သွားတဲ့ခုရဲ့ title ဟုတ်လားကျွန်တော်ခေါင်းစဉ်ပါလဲဆိုတာကျွန်တော်တို့ခံမှန်းကြည့်မယ်နော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့
Okay, so we're going to get right into number 2 in our agenda and start with the brainstorming and the text coding techniques. So brainstorming is a literacy technique where the person who's trying to engage with a particular passage looks at the title to try to get a sense or an understanding of what's to come in that passage. So we're going to break down and apply this brainstorming technique with this title for our passage today on stigma.
ဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျွန်တော်ပထမ technique လို့မှာတော့ခဏပြောလို့ brainstorming ပေါ့နော်ကျွန်တော်အသစ်တွေရှင်း brainstorming ဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့ခေါင်းစဉ်ကိုကြည့်ပြီးတော့တွေးကြည့်တယ်အမျိုးမျိုးတွေးကြည့်ဒါဘာဖြစ်နိုင်မလဲဒီ reading ကဘာဖြစ်နိုင်မလဲဆိုတော့ရှောက်တွေးကြည့်တယ်ပေါ့နော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့အဲ့ဒီ technique ကိုကျွန်တော်ဒီ paragraph ကို apply လုပ်ပါမယ်
So in starting this process, I'm reading the title, which is What is Stigma? And we can see that there's a question mark. So we know that this passage that's to follow is going to be responding to that question. So that's a really good context clue for us to kind of get a sense of what this passage is trying to tell us and more likely than not informing us about this topic. Even if you don't necessarily know exactly what stigma means, the paragraph that's to follow should be informative in teaching us about that.
ဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျွန်တော်ဒီခေါင်းစဉ်ကြည့်လိုက်တော့ရေးထားတယ် what is stigma ကျွန်တော် stigma ဆိုတော့သိချင်သိတယ်မသိချင်မသိဒါပေမဲ့ကြည့်လိုက်တာနဲ့ဒါကမေးခွန်းဖြစ်နေတယ်เนาะမေးခွန်းဖြစ်နေဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော်သိပြီဟုတ်ပြီဒီစာပိုက်ကကျွန်တော်တို့ကိုတခုခုပြောချင်တာ information ပေးချင်တာဖြစ်မယ်ဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော်သိနေပြီ
So a stigma is maybe not a word that you've encountered, or maybe it is one that you have so far in your English language learning. But what's really important to note is if you've seen it in another passage that you've read before, maybe you have some sense of what it means. Maybe it's something that you have heard about and it seems like it's a negative thing, or it has something to do with how people are looked at, perhaps in society. And if you're able to kind of build up an understanding of what context clues surround that word in other passages that you've read, it might give you a good sense of what's to come in this passage, specifically around the unpacking and defining of stigma. So that was the kind of overall approach to brainstorming. In this case, it can look very different based on what text you're looking at, but in engaging with a very short title and particularly one that is focused on unpacking a particular definition of a word, that would be how we would approach it.
Okay ကျွန်တော်ဟို brainstorming ဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော်မျိုးမျိုးလုပ်လို့ရပါတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့လောလောဒီသင်ခန်းစာနဲ့ပတ်သက်မယ်ဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့ခုနပြောလို့ပဲခေါင်းစဉ်လေးကိုကြည့်မယ်ခေါင်းစဉ်ကြည့်ပြီးတော့ဟုတ်ပြီကျွန်တော်ပါတွေးကြည့်မယ်အမျိုးမျိုးစပြီးတော့တွေးကြည့်မှာဘာဖြစ်နိုင်မလဲဆိုတော့ဒီတော့ကျွန်တော်ရဲ့ reading comprehension အတွက်နားလည်ဖို့အတွက်ကျွန်တော်တို့ကူညီမယ်
So before I define stigma, I want us to do a little bit of practice with this second literacy technique, which is text coding. Before I get too much further here, I want to show you this really helpful key that we've put together. And if you were on the lesson on Tuesday, you would have worked with this tool before. And if it's completely new to you, don't worry. It's very easy to use and we'll walk you through every single step of how to apply it. So let me scroll down so you can take a look at it here on my screen.
Okay ကျွန်တော်ဒီ text coding လုပ်တော့မယ်เนาะ text code ဒီတော့ဒီသင်္ကေတလေးတွေသုံးမယ်ကျွန်တော်တို့အင်္ဂါနေ့ကလာမယ်ဆိုရင်တော့ကျွန်တော်နည်းနည်းနားလည်မှာပါဒီသင်္ကေတလေးတွေသုံးမယ် keyword ပြီးကျွန်တော် unknown words ဆလာ keywords နဲ့ start ပေးမယ်မသိတာရှိရင် question mark တွေပေးမယ်ပေါ့เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့
So before we move any forward, it's really important for us to recognize that these two literacy techniques, the brainstorming and the text coding, are really related to one another. The brainstorming being looking at the title and getting some sense of what's to come in the following passage, and the text coding as a tool for actually starting to unpack and make your way through the paragraph itself. So with that, you can see that we've got some steps here that we really encourage students to use. First would be brainstorming the title, which is what we already did. And then we're going to be moving into reading and text coding. And if you need to, trying your best to read through it twice. But at this point, I don't want you to try to do that. I really want you to just focus on watching me apply this text coding technique to the first sentence of this paragraph.
ဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျွန်တော်တို့ခုနဆရာပြောသွားတော့ကျွန်တော် brainstorm လုပ်မယ်ဖတ်မယ် text coding လုပ်မယ်ခါကျတော့နှစ်ခါသုံးခါလောက်ဖတ်ရတော့เนาะတစ်ခုခုကိုနားလည်အောင်ဒါပေမဲ့လောလောဆယ်တော့ကျွန်တော်တစ်ခါဖတ်မယ်ပြီးကြရင်ကျွန်တော်တို့မသိတဲ့စကားလုံးလေးတွေရှင်းပြမယ်နောက် number လေးကတော့ကျွန်တော် summarize လုပ်မယ်ပေါ့နော်
So let's start with the first sentence here. I'm going to begin by reading it just so that you all can hear me read it. And then from there, I'm going to start using these text codes in our in this table right over here within the sentence itself. So the sentence reads, stigma is when individuals with a certain characteristic or attribute become discredited and or rejected by society as a result of that characteristic or attribute. Okay, so looking at our text coding key over here, we can see that there's keywords, which means really important words that we've identified in that paragraph that seem to tell us about what the overall message of the paragraph is trying to convey. We would use a star for that. Unknown words would be a question mark, details would be a circle, and important info would be underlining. So after reading that first sentence, the thing that jumps out to me immediately is the word stigma, which we know is in the title and we spent some time brainstorming, and it still might be something that's completely new to you. So for me, at least, I would want to use our text code and put a star next to it because it's something that we definitely want to make sure that we're paying attention to moving forward.
ဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျွန်တော်ဒီမှာပထမဖတ်လိုက်တဲ့အခါကျတော့ stigma ဆိုကျွန်တော် keyword ဆိုသိလာတယ်เนาะအဲကြောင့် text stigma နားလေးမှာ keyword star လေးပေးထားမယ်
So as we continue going on from stigma, it would say stigma is when individuals with a certain characteristic or attribute. So I immediately get to the characteristic or attribute, and I say to myself, you know, maybe I've heard the word characteristic before, but attribute might be something that's a little bit unfamiliar to me. It might be an unknown word. So I'm going to right now just give it a question mark, just so I can make a note to go back and either look it up or reevaluate this unknown word for my own English language learning development.
Okay, you know, stigma is an individual. It's one individual with certain characteristics or attributes. You know, whole attributes ဆိုတော့ characteristics ဆိုတော့ကြားဘူးလို့ပဲเนาะဒီတော့အဲ့နားလေးမှာ question mark ပေးခြင်းရပါတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့ attributes ဆိုတော့မကြားဘူးဆိုရင်အဲ့နားလေးမှာ question mark ပေးမယ်ပေါ့နော်ဟောမသိဘူးဒါမကြားဘူးဆိုရင် question mark ပေးမယ်
So I'm going to start back up here just so we can kind of keep reading together. So with a certain characteristic or attribute, which we've identified with a question mark, become discredited and or rejected by society. So again, I've kind of run into a word here that perhaps is something you might have seen in another text before, but it might be unfamiliar. So next to discredited, I'm going to put another question mark just so that I can make a note to go back and perhaps look it up.
Okay, ကျွန်တော်ဆက်ဖတ်မယ် become discredited ပေါ့နော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျွန်တော် discredited ဆိုလည်းတိတ်မကြားဘူးဒီတော့အဲ့နားလေးမှာ question mark ပေးမယ် and or rejected rejected ကတော့ကျွန်တော်ကြားရင်ကြားဘူးမယ်အဲ့တော့more or lessအဲ့နားလေးမှာ question mark ပေးခြင်းလည်းရပါတယ်เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့
So we're going to keep moving on here. So a characteristic or attribute become discredited and or rejected by society as a result of that characteristic or attribute. So again, we're seeing that characteristic or attribute comes up not only at the very beginning of the sentence, but again at the end. So we know that these are really important words that are associated with this first sentence. So we very may well want to take this and underline it because that indicates to us that it's important information. So we're going to go up here to become, and we're going to underline this entire back half of the sentence.
Okay, ကျွန်တော်ဒီ characteristics or attributes ဆိုတော့ပြန်ပေါ်လာတယ်ပေါ့နော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ဒီစာကြောင်းမှာဒီတော့ဒီစာကြောင်းဟာဒီ phrase ဟာတော်တော်အရေးပါတဲ့အရာတစ်ခုဖြစ်တယ်ဒီတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့ဒါ important information ဖြစ်တယ်ဒီတော့မြင်တာမယ် analyze လုပ်မယ်ပေါ့နော်
So through this process, when we started off, I told you that I wasn't going to define what stigma means, But through this careful review of this first sentence, I think we're able to figure it out. And if we look at this underlined section here, what we can see is stigma is when individuals with, and we're not 100% sure on the characteristic or attribute part just yet, but we know that they become discredited. So meaning that we're going to be defining stigma as becoming discredited and or rejected by society as a result of that characteristic or attribute. So actually this back half of the sentence is the exact definition of the word. But let's go in and take a closer look, because if we look at our steps for reading a text, what we can see here is after we've read it and we've text coded, which we've done, not the whole thing, but just a sentence, then we need to go back, we need to review these unknown words. So even though we may not have a complete understanding just yet, careful review will help hopefully illuminate the definition that we just found.
Okay, ကျွန်တော်တို့stigma ဆိုတာပေါ့နော် okay နည်းနည်းလေးခေါင်းထဲမှာဟုတ်ပြီဝင်လာပြီဒါဘာဖြစ်နိုင်မလဲ stigma ဆိုတာကျွန်တော်တို့လူတစ်ယောက်ရဲ့ characteristics တို့ရဲ့ဇယိုက်ပေါ့နော်ဒီစားပြောမှာဇယိုက်ကဟုတ်လားပတ်ဝန်းကျင်ကဟုတ်လား society မှာပါတယ်နော်စကားလုံးပတ်ဝန်းကျင်ကရှုံချတယ်မကြိုက်ဘူးပြီးတော့သူတို့လှုပ်တဲ့ပုံစံသူတို့ရဲ့ style ပြောမှာသူတို့ရဲ့ character ဟုတ်လားရှုံချစရာဖြစ်လာတယ်ပြီးတော့သူတို့ရှက်တယ်ရှက်လာကြောက်လာတယ်ပေါ့နော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့အဲ့ဒါ stigma ဖြစ်လာတယ်ဟုတ်ကဲ့
So let's start with this first word that we've put our unknown text code next to, discredited. Now, you might have seen the word credit in English before, meaning that you've gained something or you've acquired or you've earned something. You've received a credit. So that might be a word that's somewhat familiar. So if we break this up and we put a little hyphen between discredit and credit, you can just look at the word credit itself and you might know what that means. Okay. And if you do, then what you can think about is, okay, well, what does that dis part of the word mean? Typically in English, when we use dis on a word, it makes it negative. So if you are gaining credit, to put dis in front of it means that you're losing credit, perhaps, okay, in most contexts. So if that's a word that's unfamiliar and you see dis, try to break it up into those two parts to assess it.
Okay ကျွန်တော်တို့ပထမစကားလုံးမသိတဲ့အလုံး work ပါလဲဆိုတော့discredited ပေါ့နော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ဒီစကားလုံးကိုကြည့်မယ်ဆိုရင်ဘာတွေ့ရလဲဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော် credit လာ credit ဆိုတာကြားဘူးပါဟာလားကျွန်တော်ဘာမှ credit card တို့ credit ပေးတာတို့เนาะကြားဘူးတယ်ဒီတော့ဒီစကားလုံးကိုနှစ်ချမ်းဖည့်လိုက်မယ်ဆိုရင်နည်းနည်းအဆင်ပြေလာတယ်နည်းနည်းဟိုအတိတ်ပဲနည်းနည်းပေါ်လာတယ်ပေါ့နော်အဲ့ဒါ technique တစ်ခုပါဟုတ်ကဲ့
So if credit is still a word that you're not familiar with, then you could just go and look it up, get a translation. And if that's not available to you in that moment, because perhaps, you are taking an exam and you need to be able to work through this word, the best thing to do is to look at this and or, okay? And or in English basically means that it could be both of the words on either side of the and or it could be just one of those two. So the two are related in that they have a similar meaning to the point of the sentence.
Okay ကျွန်တော်တို့ဒီ discredit ဆိုမသိဘူးအဲ့ဒါဆိုရင်ဆက်ဖတ်မယ်ဆိုရင်တို့ဘေးနားပါရှိလဲဆို and or ဟလာ rejected ဆိုတာတွေ့ရတယ်ဒီတော့ဒီ discredit နဲ့ rejected ဆိုတာခက်ဆင်ဆင်ဖြစ်နေတယ်အဲ့ဒါတစ်ခုမဟုတ်တစ်ခုဟလာပြောရတယ်ဒီတော့အဓိပ္ပာယ်ကဆင်တယ်တစ်ခုမသိတစ်ခုသိလို့ရတယ်ပေါ့နော်အဲ့ဒါလည်း technique တစ်ခုပါ
So if discredit or credit wasn't a word that you're familiar with after breaking it down, but you've heard of or you've read before the word reject or rejected, you would know that that's a kind of a negative word in English, meaning that someone has been pushed out of or removed from. So if you've heard of reject or rejected, but you're not sure about discredit, using this and or is really helpful to know that at least this is a negative word that is concerning someone or some individual, given that we're talking about individuals in this first sentence.
Okay ဒီတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့ reject ဆိုတော့သိတယ် discredit ဆိုတာမသိဘူးဒါပေမဲ့ reject ဆိုတာဟာလားပယ်ချတယ်ပေါ့နော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ပယ်ချတယ်ငင်းတယ်အဲ့ဒါသိရဆိုတော့ discredit ဆိုတော့လည်းအဲ့ဒီစကားလုံးအဲ့ဒီအသုံးတော့အဲ့ဒီပဲရှိမယ်လို့ကျွန်တော်တို့ခံယူလို့ရတယ်
So let's move on to our next unknown word, attribute. Attribute might be a word that you're familiar with, or perhaps it might not. but you may have come into contact with the word characteristic before, meaning that it's a component of someone's personhood. It's a quality that a person possesses. So if you've come into contact with characteristic before, then you can look at the word or, which we kind of just talked about with the and or, and you can say that it could be one or the other, meaning that they probably have similar or somewhat interchangeable meanings. So again, if you know what characteristic means, which is in English kind of a quality that an individual possesses, given that we're talking about individuals here, then attribute must be very similar to a quality that a person possesses. So if you can't look this up in the moment, then you can use that strategy to get through it. Or if attribute is really unfamiliar, you can look it up later.
ဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျွန်တော်ဟုတ်ပြီနောက်စကားလုံးမသိတာပါလဲ attribute မသိဘူးဒါပေမဲ့ခုနကျွန်တော်ပြောလို့ဒီမှာစကားလုံးနှလုံးပေးထားတယ် characteristics or attribute ဟုတ်လား characteristics ဆိုကျွန်တော် character လာတယ် character ဆိုခုနပြောလို့ပမာလို့ဗီဇစရိုက်ပေါ့နော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ဒီတော့ quality ပြောရမလားဒီတော့စကားလုံးကိုပြန်ပြီးတော့ဖတ်မယ်ဆိုရင် sentence ကိုပြန်ဖတ်မယ်ဆိုရင် sigma is when individuals with a certain characteristics ဟုတ်လား individual လူဟုတ်လားသူရဲ့ quality လူတစ်ယောက်ရဲ့ quality လူတစ်ယောက်ရဲ့ attribute လူတစ်ယောက်ရဲ့စရိုက်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ဟုတ်ပါပြီနော်
So to make sure that we're following our steps here, I want to summarize this first sentence before I give you all an opportunity to work on this yourself and start applying this technique. So to summarize this sentence, it's basically defining and describing to us exactly what stigma is, which is when individuals or people with a certain characteristic or attribute, a quality or a trait that an individual possesses becomes discredited or it loses credit. Or the individual is rejected from the society that they're in because of those characteristics and attributes, meaning the qualities or the traits or the behaviors that the person is admitting or possessing.
ဒီတော့ဒီစာကြောင်းဖတ်သွားတဲ့ဟာကိုကျွန်တော်ပြန်ပြီးတော့ခြုံပြီးတော့ပြန်ကြည့်မယ်เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့ခြုံပြန်ကြည့်မယ်ဒီတော့ဘာပြောချင်တာလဲဆိုတော့ stigma ဆိုတာလူတစ်ယောက်ရဲ့ quality လူတစ်ယောက်ရဲ့စရိုက်ဟုတ်လားဒါပေမဲ့အဲ့ဒီစရိုက်ကပတ်ဝန်းကျင်ကရှုံချတယ်ပတ်ဝန်းကျင်ကမကြိုက်ဘူးပြောအောင်လားဒီတော့အဲ့ဒီစရိုက်က stigma ဖြစ်လာတယ်ဟုတ်လား
Okay, so what we're going to be doing now is giving you all a chance to work on applying these techniques yourself. But we're going to do it in a way that's supposed to be low stress. You're not going to be evaluated at all, so don't worry. It's just about starting to actually apply these really important techniques to your literacy learning. So what I'd like you to do is to turn to whatever page you're on. If you've got one piece of paper that's been marked up on both sides, or if you're in a notebook, either or, but turn to that first text code chart that I'm showing here on the right-hand side of my page. And I'm going to remove this for now. But if you have your setup, you would want to write in with your pen or pencil, whatever you have, what is stigma? And then from there, what I want you to do is make your way through that process that we just worked through, right? First, I want you to go through and brainstorm the title. I know that I just worked you through the brainstorming process, but we want you to get a chance to do it for yourself. And then after you're done brainstorming the title and inserting that down here in this box, then we want you to actually go through and start to use those text coding those text codes to actually apply them for yourself, right? I know that I went through and just started doing them for a couple of these words in that very first sentence, but we want you to start from the beginning and go through and do the entire thing on your own.
Okay, ဒီတော့ဒီကသင်တန်းသားသင်တန်းလူတွေအလဲပေါ့เนาะကျွန်တော်လုပ်ပြီးသွားပြီပထမစာကြောင်းအတွက်เนาะဒီအတိုင်းလေးပဲခုနဆွဲထားတဲ့ဇာတ်လေး table လေးကိုသုံးပြီးတော့လုပ်ပေးပါเนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့ရှေ့မှာတော့ဒီလိုမျိုးဒီစာပိတ်တော့မရှိတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့ကျွန်တော်ဇာတ်လေးရှိရဆို keyword အောက်မှာကိုက keyword ဆိုရင် stigma ဆိုရင် stigma လေးရေးပေးပါเนาะအဲ့ဇာတ်ထဲမှာအဲ့ table ထဲမှာပေါ့เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျွန်တော်တို့အဆင်ပြေကျွန်တော်လက်ညှိုးလေးထောင်ပေးပါဟုတ်ကဲ့ဟိုမဟုတ်လဲ
So right now it's 8:33 my time, but it would be 6:33. Yeah, 6:33.
7:03.
7:03. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, it's fine.
7:03 your time. So let's give you 5 minutes to work on this. And again, don't stress. Just try your best to work through using both the brainstorming and the text coding techniques to whatever extent you're able to in this paragraph.
Okay.
So sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was
No,
going to
go
say,
ahead.
just like yesterday, the first thing you'll have to do is copy this chart down. So if you were here on Tuesday, it's the same chart. If you were not here on Tuesday, can we show them that chart and give them a second
Yeah.
to copy
Mhm.
it? And it does not have to be perfect. So we are going to show you a paragraph that you can practice with, and you will find keywords that you will put a star next to, or on your paper you could just write keywords, unknown words, which would be a question mark, any details which we did not see in this first paragraph, and then you can underline any sentences or parts of sentences that you think are important.
Okay ကျွန်တော်ဒီမှာတော့ underline လုပ်လို့မရဘူးပေါ့နော်ဒါပေမဲ့ဒီunderline လုပ်ချင်ကျွန်တော်စာပိုက်ရဲ့အရှေ့လေးကိုရေးပြလိုက်ပေါ့နော်အရှေ့နဲ့အစနဲ့အဆုံးလေးအဲ့လိုလေးရေးလိုက်ပေါ့နော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့အဆင်ပြေကျွန်တော် check box ထဲမှာပြောမဟုတ်ရင်လည်းဒီ unmute လုပ်ပြီးကျွန်တော်တို့ပြောပါစာဖတ်လို့ရရင်နော် Okay. One minute. Okay.
Do you have the second paragraph for them to read?
Oh, I do. I think that we were going to actually have them go through this on their own, particularly this
that first
last, the back half, and then we were going to go into this is the second one next.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
No, it's okay. No worries.
Hi, David. The more. Okay. น้องไม่น้องไปเทจีสุดเต็มมาเลยเนี่ย
น้องจะอะไร
ရတယ်ဟိုကိုကဟိလိုက်တကူပါတွန်းhe paragraph something in that the jang he text coding heading in a keyword to be လိုက်မှာဟောင်းမို့လဲတော့ keyword ဂျင်နာ heading နာထဲလောကမှာဟောင်းလဲတော့ unknown words ဂျင်နာ coding မတဲ့တော့จางအထုံနာ number ของ date ของto be number နမို့လဲတော့ coding จางအတော့နာเป็น important information to be စာကြောင်းမတဲ့ sentence ของနမို့လဲတော့ adding စာကြောင်း a full sentence about art ကိုလောအမစာမပတ်နာတော့နာအားကြောင်းတယ်น้องทำไม่ได้ကမတိရရှင်းပြောပါဟို chat box နဲ့လည်းရေးလို့ရပါတယ်ပမာလို့ရေးလိုက်ရတယ်ကျွန်တော်
So why don't we spend maybe 2 more minutes again, just trying to practice the text coding after you've done a little bit of brainstorming on the title yourself, and then we're going to move into a second exercise.
Now 10 minutes ဆက်ပြီမယ်နော်
Okay. So how's everyone doing? Doing okay? At least starting to try these things out, trying out these techniques a little bit.
And this paragraph is really hard. I think the paragraph we used on Tuesday was a little easier, but if you are planning to take IELTS, this is something that you would see on the test.
Yeah. So we're not going to go through your text codes right now because we're going to actually transition into a second exercise where we're going to walk through it all together and kind of build out one of these text code charts together. But what I do want to do is I want to summarize the whole paragraph for you very quickly so that you can see kind of how you did in making your way through it. As teacher Jen just said, it's really important to recognize that this is a harder paragraph, but we want to be able to give you a challenge and start working through some new words. So, Kai, I don't know if you want to translate before I move.
Go ahead.
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, just go ahead. So, then okay. အခုကျွန်တော်တို့ဒါကတော့အားလုံးတော့ပြန်ပြီးတော့ရှင်းပြတော့ဘူးဒါပေမဲ့နည်းနည်းလေးတော့ဒီစာပိုက်ရဲ့အကြောင်းကိုဟုတ်လားအတိတ်ပဲကိုကျွန်တော်ပြောမယ် summary လေးကိုပြောမယ်ပြီးကြရင်ကျွန်တော်ဒုတိယပိုက်ကိုဆက်သွားမယ်เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့
So in this first sentence that we all did together, we were able to identify a key word at least. I identified the stigma as a key word. You may have identified other ones, which is perfectly fine. We looked at characteristics and attributes, and we also looked at discredit and reject. And then we realized that at the end of the sentence, it was basically telling us exactly what stigma is. It was defining it for us. Stigma is, and then we went on to actually find out that it's when someone is either rejected or discredited from their society because of particular characteristics and attributes that they possess. So in the second part of the sentence, it goes on to say, and I'm going to read this just for you all to hear, when individuals' behaviors become classified as mental disorders. Now, classified may have been an unknown word for some people, and also mental disorders, or this phrase, very well may have been an unknown word too. But let's keep on going. When individuals' behaviors become classified as mental disorders, this classification, we're seeing another version of the same word here, classified, classification. So that might have been something that jumped out at folks. And for that reason, you may have underlined it as important information, or you may have even put a question mark if it was an unknown word. Often discredits, which is something that we worked through above, the individuals in the eyes of society and lends to their being rejected as individuals. So, oh, sorry, Kai, please.
ဒီတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့ဒီဒုတိယစာပိုက်လေးကိုဖတ်သွားတယ်เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျွန်တော်တို့ underline လုပ်တာ keyword လေးတွေ star ပေးတာဟုတ်လားအများကြီးရှိလိမ့်မယ်ဥပမာ classified ဆိုတာဟုတ်လားmore than mental disorders ဆိုပါလဲဟို keyword ဖြစ်နိုင်တယ်ဒီမှာဟုတ်လားပြီးကြတော့ classification ဆိုလဲသိရင်သိမယ်မသိရင်လည်းမသိဘူးအမှာ question mark လေးပြင်ပေးမယ်ဒါပေမဲ့စကားလုံးတွေက discredit or rejected ကိုပြန်ပေါ်လာတယ်เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့
So when we realize that stigma is when individuals with certain characteristics or attributes get rejected from society because of those characteristics and attributes, down here what we learn is that it's actually individuals' behaviors. Those are the characteristics and attributes, right? When their behaviors become classified by society, because we learn that this has to do with how they're seen by society, classified by society as a mental disorder, which we know, reading this first sentence here, must be something that's negative, or at least seen as negative because of this discredited word that we work through, or this rejected word that we work through. So this phrase here, this classification, meaning that they're being labeled or looked at by society, which we can see down here. And this is kind of an expression in the eyes of society, meaning they're being perceived or viewed as discredited because of this disorder, which is seen as negative in the sentence. The individual in the eyes of society then leads to being rejected as individuals, meaning that they're being rejected by all of society because they're being classified or looked at negatively because of this quote unquote mental disorder, which is something that we could debate about, but we're not gonna talk about that today.
Okay. ဒီဒုတိယစာပိုက်လေးကိုဖတ်သွားတော့ဟုတ်လားကျွန်တော် stigma ဆိုတော့နည်းနည်းလေးပိုရှင်းလာတယ်เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့နည်းနည်းလေးပိုရှင်းလာတယ်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ when individuals behavior ကျွန်တော်လူတစ်ယောက်ရဲ့ behavior ဟုတ်လားဇေယျ quality ပါတယ်တို့ရဲ့ဟုတ်လားဇေယျအချင်းအပြုမှုပြောမလားဒီအပြုမှုကြီးကသူအချို့တွေကဟုတ်လား mental disorder စိတ်ချမ်းသာရေးဆိုပြီးတော့ဟုတ်လား label ပေးလိုက်ရင်ဟုတ်လားနာမည်ခေါ်လိုက်ပြောမလားအဲ့ဒါကြောင့်ဒီသူတို့ရဲ့အကျင့်ကြီးကဟုတ်လား ပတ်ဝန်းကျင်ကရှုံချတဲ့သဘောဖြစ်လာတယ်ဒီတော့အဲ့တို့ရဲ့အကျင့်ကအမောနဲ့တို့ရဲ့ဇယိုက်က stigma ဖြစ်လာတယ်เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျွန်တော်လည်းဥပမာလေးပြင်ကျွန်တော်ဗမာပြည်မှာကျွန်တော်ဥပမာ depression mental health စိတ်ချမ်းသာရေးနဲ့ပတ်သက်ရင်ကျွန်တော် stigma ပေါ့เนาะကျွန်တော်သိမပြောရအော်နည်းနည်းစိတ်အားငယ်နေ depression တွေပါဝင်ကျွန်တော်သိမပြောရကြဘူးပေါ့เนาะကျွန်တော်မြန်မာအတိုင်းဝိုင်းမှာဖြစ်လို့လဲဆိုတော့သူများတွေရှုံချမှာကြောက်တယ်ဟုတ်လားဒီတော့ကျွန်တော် mental health ကိစ္စဆိုရင်ကျွန်တော်မြန်မာပြည်မှာဆို stigma ဖြစ်တယ်သူများတွေသိမပြောရအောင်အရှုံချခံမှာကြောက်လို့ဟုတ်လားဒါပေမဲ့ဒါတကယ်အရေးကြီးတဲ့ယောဂကြီးတစ်ခုလို့ပြောလို့ပြောရတယ်เนาะ depression တော့ပေါ့ဆိုတကယ် serious ဖြစ်တဲ့အရင်အရေးကြီးတဲ့ဟာဖြစ်တယ်ဖွင့်မပြောရင်ဒါကုလို့မရဘူးပြောမလား counseling တွေပါဝင်လို့မရဘူးဒီတော့အဲ့ဒါ stigma ကြီးဖြစ်နေတယ်เนาะ okay so I'll just explain them what stigma was
Yeah, thanks, Kai. Okay, so we're going to move into the second activity for today, and I know that we have about 15 minutes left, but I think that that's going to be enough time for us to start working on this together. So if you wouldn't mind flipping over that piece of paper, or at least getting that second chart that's hopefully blank in front of you if you have it, so that we can start to go through this together.
Okay, ကျွန်တော်ဒီ chart တော့မယ်ဒီအောက်မှာနည်းနည်းလေးပို့ပြီးတော့ဟာထပ်ပြီးတော့ချက်လိုက်ပေါ့နော်ဒီ chart လေးကိုချက်လိုက်ပေါ့ဒုတိယစာပိုက်တယ်နော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ဒီ chart ကိုပဲတော့ပါမယ် Okay အခုကြားပြီလား
So we're going to approach this entire paragraph, and I know it looks big, but we'll be able to at least start to dive into it together. The first thing that I want you all to do is to look at the title that we have here. So we're seeing a familiar word, stigma, and we're also seeing psychological problems. What we'd like you to do is take that and stick it right into the heading section of your text code chart. So if you have your blank text code chart, you can just write it in there. I'm going to make it a little smaller for us. Okay. Now that you've got it written in there, or once you have it written in there, then I want you to start the brainstorming process that we went through in that first example paragraph.
Okay ကျွန်တော်ဒီ chart ကိုပဲသုံးမယ်ဒုတိယအပိုက်ကိုစတော့ပါတော့မယ်เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျွန်တော်ခေါင်းစဉ်ကိုကြည့်မယ်ခေါင်းစဉ်က stigma and psychological problems ဒါကိုစပြီးတော့ brainstorm လုပ်ပါမယ်ဟုတ်ကဲ့စ brainstorm လုပ်မယ်အမှရေးလိုက်ပါအဲ့ brainstorm ဆိုတဲ့အပိုက်လေးမှာเนาะစရေးပါ Okay
So in doing this together, and now that we know what the word stigma means, I want you to look at this and we want to brainstorm together on what we think the rest of the paragraph that it's to follow this title, what it might be pointing to or suggesting or discussing.
Okay ကျွန်တော်ဟိုခေါင်းထဲမှာဝင်လာလေးစရေးပါဒီခေါင်းစဉ်ကိုကြည့်ပြီးတော့ဒီခေါင်းစဉ်စာပိုက်ကဘာဖြစ်နိုင်မလဲဆိုတော့လေးစရေးပါ
So I'm happy to take notes and fill in the text coding chart here with some of the thoughts that you all have after you've written them down.
Okay ဟို share ခြင်းပေါ့နော်ကျွန်တော်ဟို chat ထဲမှာရေးပေးပါကျေးဇူးပြုပြီးတော့ဟုတ်ကဲ့ဟိုကိုရေးထားလေးတယ်ဟို share ရပါတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့ဟုတ်ကဲ့ share ခြင်းကျွန်တော်တယောက်နှစ်ယောက်လောက် share ပေးပါ
And last time I read the chat.
Oh, great.
Do that for you. I can also do that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's great.
So someone's saying it's about mental problems. So mental problems.
Mental problems.
Awesome.
So right now we are brainstorming, what do you think this paragraph is about? Getting anxiety, depression, stress, and burnout. That is a private message to me, so.
Okay, gotcha.
Need self-compassion. So anxiety, depression, stress, and need compassion. Self-compassion, yes.
So I think that this is a really great start, and I think you all did a really wonderful job at looking at stigma, which is a word that might have been completely new, and this concept of psychological problems, which is actually very similar to that phrase that we saw in that first paragraph called mental disorders that teacher Kai helped work us through. So I think that this is a really, really great start to our brainstorming for the rest of the paragraph. So really well done. What we're going to be doing now is, again, just in the interest of time, is we're going to be moving on to applying our text codes. So what I'd like you all to do is actually start to go through and do that on your own. We'll give you about 3 or 4 minutes to do that. And then we're going to bring everyone back, and I'm going to fill out the chart with some of the keywords, the unknown words, the details, and the important information that you all marked up in your text.
ဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျွန်တော်တို့အခုကျွန်တော်3-4မိနစ်လောက်ပေးမယ်เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့ဒီစာပိုက်ကိုဖတ်ပြီးတော့ဟုတ်ကဲ့ဖတ်လို့မရရင်ပြောပါကျွန်တော် font ကိုနည်းနည်းချက်ပြလိုက်မယ် Nick, if you could just stretch the reading so that
Sure.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah. Is this better for people?
Yeah.
Okay.
So အဲ့ဒါလေးကိုဖတ်ပေးပါပြီးကြတော့ဟိုဒီဇာတ်လေးကိုစပြပေးပါเนาะဟို keyboard လေးတွင်ရေးမယ်မသိတာရှိဟိုမှာ question mark unknown words အောက်မှာရေးမယ်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ပြီးတော့အရေးကြီးတဲ့စာပိုက်တွေရှိရင်လည်းဟိုအဲ့အောက်မှာရေးမယ်เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့3-4မိနစ်ပေးမယ်เนาะ keyword.
So people are starting to share their text
That's great. Well, I'm happy to start with keywords if you want to read any that folks have. I'm not looking at the chat.
So we have stigmatization. That was very hard for me to say. So that's a keyword. So at this time, if anyone wants to share a keyword, an important word that they found, you can do that in the chat. So we also have mental disorder as a keyword.
Okay, great.
Abnormality. Okay, and we also have abnormality as an unknown word.
Oh, okay,
And
good.
sometimes that is okay to have it as a keyword and an unknown word.
Absolutely.
Another unknown word we have is perception.
Okay.
And self-schema. Okay, and we're seeing a lot of you guys are getting the same, very similar text codes. We have abnormality as a keyword and self-schema again as an unknown word. So keywords, a good clue is a word that you see often.
Are there any details that are coming up? And it's okay if there aren't any. But if not, then maybe we can move on to some important information if anyone has identified some important information in the text.
ဟို underline လုပ်ထားလေးဟိုနားလောက်ချင်တဲ့ဟာလေးရှိလားမသိဘူးเนาะဟိုစာပိုင်းလေးရေးနေရပါတယ်
So on Tuesday, we read a text with a lot of numbers and dates and names. So we did have a lot of things we circled, but in this text, it's not really written that way. So it's okay if you do not have anything circled. Does anyone have anything they underlined, a sentence or part of a sentence that they thought was important? Okay, plays a major role. We have that as something someone underlined. Plays a major role. That's definitely, those are important words. Whenever something plays a major role, that's saying this is important.
Awesome. Nick, what you can do is you can just read through the paragraph and then obviously hit on those keywords and unknown words and break down the unknown words for them, and then hopefully we could summarize.
Sure.
Save some time.
Absolutely. Well, great job, firstly, applying this technique, especially if it's something that's completely brand new to you. So I'm going to read through this. An individual's abnormality or having a mental disorder or being mentally ill or crazy, etc., can be one of those attributes that affects others' perception of that individual as well as the individual's own self-schema, and can lead to rejection by those considered to not have a mental disorder. One's culture or ethnic background plays a major role in the stigmatization of mental illness and seeking help. For example, African American, Latino, Latina, and Asian populations. Okay, so now that we've read through the paragraph and you've heard me read it, let's go through some of these key words that you've identified. So let's start up here with abnormality, okay? So I'm gonna put our star next to this. So in individuals, and if we're seeing that we have this comma S, we know that it's possessive, meaning that the individual has whatever this thing is. Okay, in this case, abnormality is a word in English that basically means not normal. And you might have heard the word normal before, right? And normal in English basically means that it's something that's very common, that is seen common in the population, common in people. So you may have seen the word normal, which we can identify in here, but maybe not abnormality. So again, like we did in the paragraph before, we can stick a hyphen in there and maybe look at this normal word, okay? So if we know what normal means, we need to figure out what ab means. If we think about that first paragraph that we just read that's kind of connected to this, it's talking about mental illness as a negative thing. So ab would be an add-on to the word, which would suggest that it's probably different from normal or not necessarily right.
Okay ကျွန်တော်တို့ဒီတော့ပထမဒီမသိတဲ့စကားလုံးနဲ့ keyword က abnormality เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့နှစ်ခုစလုံးကျွန်တော်တွေ့ရတယ်ဒီတော့ abnormality ကိုကျွန်တော်တို့ဟုတ်ကဲ့ break down လုပ်မယ်ဒါပါအဓိပ္ပာယ်လဲဟုတ်ကဲ့ဖတ်ကြည့်ရင် an individual's abnormality okay individual လူတစ်ယောက်ရဲ့ abnormality ပေါ့เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့ abnormality ကကျွန်တော်မသိဘူးမဲ့ဒါကိုစိတ်ပိုင်းခွဲလိုက်မယ်ဆိုရင် ab နဲ့ normal ပေါ့เนาะ normal ဆိုအားလုံးသိရတာပုံမှန်ကျွန်တော်တို့ normal ဖြစ်တယ်ဟုတ်လားပုံမှန်ဖြစ်တယ်ပေါ့เนาะဒါပေမဲ့ abnormal ဖြစ်လာရင်ပုံမှန်မဟုတ်တော့ပြောမှာပေါ့เนาะလူတွေနဲ့တိတ်မတူတော့ဘူးဒီတော့လူတစ်ယောက်ရဲ့ပုံမှန်မဖြစ်ခြင်းပေါ့เนาะ
So we're going to move on just for the sake of time, because I know it's late for you all. And I also want to make sure that we can get through these. But the next word was mental disorder. Now, remember, Teacher Kai had talked about mental disorder in that first paragraph that we had read through. Now, the word, if we look at it together, we know that it's two words. And the first one is mental. You might have heard of the word mental before, or you might have seen it when you're thinking about someone's psychology or the health of their mind.
ဒီတော့ကျွန်တော် mental ဆိုအားလုံးသိပါเนาะစိတ်ပိုင်းဆိုင်ရာ mental ကြားဘူးမှာပါဟုတ်ကဲ့
So if you haven't heard of the word mind, or you haven't seen mental next to mind in a paragraph that you've read before, then at least you can go back and try to look this up to the best of your ability. We know that disorder is a word that can be looked at, again, through this lens of kind of breaking it up into smaller pieces. You might have heard of the word order, right? And order means consistency, or that it's the same that we would see across people or across the population if we're looking at human beings. Dis, which is actually a word that we had seen in that first paragraph, basically means that it's an abnormal, it adds a negative meaning to that word. So if orderly means consistency, adding the dis would make it unordered, or another word would be chaos.
Okay ဒီတော့ mental ဆိုတဲ့ disorder ဟုတ်ပြီ disorder breakdown ဟုတ်လားပြန်ပြီးတော့ဖဲ့လိုက်မယ်ဆိုရင် dis နဲ့ order ဖြစ်လာတယ်เนาะ order ဆိုတာကျွန်တော်သိတဲ့အတိုင်းပဲဟိုအမိန်ပေးရလဲပြောတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့ဒီမှာ order ဆိုတော့အားလုံးစနစ်တကျဖြစ်တာပေါ့เนาะဟုတ်ပဲပုံစံကျတယ်စနစ်တကျဖြစ်တဲ့ order ဖြစ်တယ်ပေါ့เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့ဒါပေမဲ့ disorder ဆိုတော့ပုံစံမကျတော့ဘူးစနစ်မကျတော့ဘူးဖျို့ဖျက်ဖြစ်တယ်ပေါ့เนาะ
Another approach that you could take, if you're actually taking the IELTS exam and you don't know what the word mental means, we can look to this word or, right? And we can see that or says being mentally ill. You may have actually heard of the word ill before, or the word sick, or seen them in a similar paragraph. So if you don't know what mental means, but you might know what disorder means, or you might be able to break down disorder to figure out that it means unordered. And you look at ill and you know that it's sick. Well, we can use some of our context clues, right? We know that the paragraph is talking about psychology, which we know has to do with the mind. So maybe what this is talking about is being sick in the mind. Some sort of interpretation like that if you're trying to quickly make your way through a text.
ဒီတော့ကျွန်တော်ဟိုအဲ့ဒါမသိတော့မှကျွန်တော် or ဟုတ်လားပြီးတော့စာကြောင်းကိုဆက်ဖတ်မယ်ဆိုရင်သူကအတိတ်ပဲလေးခက်ဆင်ဆင်လေးပေါ်ပြသွားတယ်ဟုတ်လား being mentally ill or crazy ဟုတ်လားဒီတော့အဲ့ crazy ဆိုတာနဲ့ ill ဟုတ်လား mentally ill နေမကောင်းတာဟုတ်လားဒီတော့ negative ဖြစ်တဲ့စကားလုံးဖြစ်တဲ့ disorder ဆိုတာမကောင်းတဲ့ဟိုပုံစံမကျခြင်းပေါ့နော်
So I want to hop to this last word, which was stigmatization, okay? And I put our star next to it using our text coding feature here. Now, let's go through this word in the same way that we've started to address disorder and abnormality. So we've learned about stigma. We read about it in that first paragraph, and we spent a lot of time looking at it. We can actually see that stigma is a part of stigmatization, right? We can see it right here. So if we break that up, we have a good sense of that at least it's related to stigma in some way. The tization part of stigmatization is a really sort of complex part of English. So if it's something that's unfamiliar, don't worry about it. But really what it means is that the stigma is being embedded, or it's being distributed or passed around in society. So to take something that is seen as negative already, like creating a stigma around someone, which we've already figured out has to deal with some sort of characteristic or attribute that isn't looked at in society in a positive way. It means to take that thing, that perception, or that view, and spreading it throughout society. So having other people view it in the same way.
Okay, stigmatization ဟုတ်ကဲ့ဒါကိုလည်း keyword လို့keyword မှာအများစုပို့ထားတယ်เนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့ stigma ဆိုကျွန်တော်သိပြီးပြီ stigmatization ကြတော့ဟလာ stigma တစ်ခုကို stigma လုပ်ခြင်းလို့ပြောလို့ရမှာပေါ့เนาะဒီဟုတ်ကဲ့အချင်းတစ်ခုကို stigma လုပ်ခြင်းဟာ stigmatization ဟုတ်လားဟုတ်ပြီကျွန်တော်ဥပမာကျွန်တော်ခဏစိတ်ပူတတ်တယ်ကြောက်တတ်တယ်ဟုတ်လားကျွန်တော်မို့နဲ့စိုးရင်တတ်တယ်ဟုတ်လားဒါက stigma ဖြစ်မယ်ဟုတ်လားသူများတွေကဒီကောင်ကြောက်တတ်တယ်ဒီကောင်စိုးရင်တတ်တယ်ဟုတ်လားဒီကောင်အဲ့လိုမျိုးပြောလာရပေါ့နည်းနည်းကဲ့ရဲ့လာတယ်ဒီတော့အဲ့ဒီကြောက်ရွံ့ခြင်းကို stigma လောက်လာတယ်အဲ့ဒါကို stigmatization ဖြစ်တယ်เนาะဒီထဲမှာတော့ mental health စိတ်ကျန်းမာရေးကို stigmatization လုပ်ကြတယ် stigma ဖြစ်အောင်လုပ်တယ်ကိုပြောချင်တာเนาะဟုတ်ကဲ့
So I want to just very quickly go back up to our steps for reading a text using these two literary tools, right? We all brainstormed. We did a great job doing that. You all read through the text. I reread it. And then you applied text coding. We just spent some time reviewing those unknown words. And now it's time to summarize the paragraph. So what yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Kai, please.
Okay ကျွန်တော်ဒီမှာ step လေးခုနအတိုင်းသွားတယ်เนาะပထမ brainstorm လုပ်တယ်ပြီးကျတော့ဖတ်တယ် text ကိုလုပ်တယ်မသိတဲ့စကားလုံးတွေကိုသိအောင်စ조사တယ်အခု number 4ပြန်ပြီးတော့ခြုံပြီးတော့ပြန်ကြည့်အောင် summarize လုပ်အောင်
So what the paragraph is saying, if we look at this first sentence and just trying to break it down, it's saying that an individual that might have these abnormalities or these non-normal traits that have to do with a mental disorder. So maybe having non-normal kind of functions of the mind, or being considered ill in the mind, or looked at as crazy, which is a term that maybe you all have heard, it didn't come up in the unknown words, can be one of the many attributes, right, that we talked about, or characteristics that affects how others, people in society, might see someone or perceive them of that individual, as well as how that person then begins to see themselves, right? So it's not just about how people see someone, but it's also how when people look at someone a certain way, they start to think about themselves differently.
Okay အခုပြန်ပြီးတော့ခြုံပြီးတော့ပြောမယ်เนาะကျွန်တော်ဟိုဆန်းအောင်က sigma ဆိုသိနားမလဲလို့ကျွန်တော်အတိုးကြောင့်ပြန်ပြောမယ်เนาะဆန်းတော့ဟုတ်ကဲ့ကြားလားမသိဘူး ညလေးထောင်ပေးပါဟုတ်ကဲ့stigma ဆိုအခုဥပမာတစ်ခုပြောရင်ကျွန်တော်မြန်မာပြည်မှာ mental health ပြီးတော့လိင်ပိုင်းဆိုင်ရာဟိုပညာရဲ့အခုဟုတ်လားနိုင်အဲ့ဒါလည်းနည်းနည်းဟို hot topic ဖြစ်နေတယ်ပေါ့နော်ဟိုဥပမာလိင်ပိုင်းဆိုင်ရာပညာရေးပြောမှာအကြောင်းနေမှာဟုတ်လားလိင်ပိုင်းဆိုင်ရာပညာရေးသိမယ်မသိဘူးအဲ့ဒါမြန်မာပြည်အတွက် stigma ဖြစ်နေတယ်ပြောမလားပွင့်ပွင့်လင်းမပြောရဲကြဘူးဒါပေမဲ့လိုအပ်တဲ့အရာတစ်ခုဖြစ်တယ်ချို့ရအတွက်ပေါ့နော်ချို့ရပြောမယ်ဒါပေမဲ့ချို့ရအတွက် stigma ဖြစ်တယ်ဟိုမပြောရဲဘူးဟုတ်လားဒါကျမ်းမာရေးအတွက်ဆိုမှလည်းသိမပြောရဲဘူးအဲ့ဒါ stigma ဖြစ်တယ်နော်အဲ့လိုမျိုးအဲ့ဒါကဥပမာတစ်ခုပေါ့နော် I was just saying like sex education like or health in general in Burma is a stigma people don't talk about it that often ဒီ stigma ဒီမှာတော့ကျွန်တော် mental health ပေါ့နော်စိတ်ပိုင်းဆိုင်ရာကျန်းမာရေးက stigma ဖြစ်တယ်လူတွေကသိမပြောရဲဘူးမို့လည်းကိုက depression နဲ့ပါဝင်နေဆိုရင်ဒီဟာကြီးကိုသူများတွေကဟာရှုံချလာတယ်ရှုံချလာကိုယ်တိုင်လည်းဟာဒီငါ depression ဝင်နေတာမကောင်းထင်တယ်ငါကိုယ်တိုင်ညံ့နေထင်တယ်ဆိုတာကိုယ့်အကိုဟလာစိတ်တော့ကရဝင်လာတယ်ပေါ့နော်ကိုလည်းတိတ်ပြီးတော့ confidence လည်းကျလာတယ်ပေါ့နော်အရန်ကြီးထိခိုက်ပါတယ် stigma အကြောင်းပေါ့နော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့အဲ့ဒါကိုပြောချင်တာပါ
So after someone's own self-schema, which was a word that was identified, which is how someone views himself, how that's changed by society as a result of something like a mental disorder, which is an attribute that someone can have, is being stigmatized or looked at in a negative way. That causes rejection. So the person feels rejected because of those feelings from within themselves and also from society too.
ဒီတော့ခုနပြောလို့ rejection လေကိုလည်းဟာလာဟာငါအတုံးမကြောက်ငါညံ့နေတယ်အဲ့လိုစိတ်တွေဝင်လာတယ်ဟာလာဒီပတ်ဝန်းကျင်ကရှုံချရတဲ့အတွက်နော်
In the second part of this paragraph, and I know that first sentence was really challenging, but in the second part, what it's saying is that not only does stigma have this impact on people, how they see themselves and how others view them, but also the culture and ethnic background or the ethnicity or the place that the person comes from also plays a major role, meaning that it impacts or it affects that process of stigmatization, which we had talked about, which is about the spreading of stigma across people within a society or a culture.
ဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျွန်တော်ဒီအများစုကျွန်တော်အာရှလူမျိုးဆိုပေါ့နော်အာရှအတိုင်းဝိုင်းမှာဆိုရင် stigmatization ကနည်းနည်းများတယ်ဒီဥပမာဒီခုနပြောလို့ mental health စိတ်ပိုင်းဆိုင်ရာကျန်းမာရေးဆိုရင်ကျွန်တော်သိမပြောကြဘူးကျွန်တော်မိသားစုထဲမှာအတိုင်းဝိုင်းမှာသိမပြောတဲ့အရာတစ်ခုဖြစ်တယ်ပေါ့နော်အဲ့ဒါကြောင့်ဒီကျွန်တော်ရဲ့ယဉ်ကျေးမှုနဲ့လည်းနည်းနည်းဆိုင်တယ်လို့ပြောတယ်ဒီmental health ကို stigmatize လုပ်တာဟာကျွန်တော်ယဉ်ကျေးမှုနဲ့လည်းဟို background နဲ့လည်းလူမျိုးပြောမှာအဲ့ဒါလည်းနည်းနည်းဆိုင်တယ်လို့ပြောပါတယ်
So instead of individuals seeking help or getting treatment for their illness, they may feel like they can't do that because of the stigmatization that has happened within society, perhaps because of the effects of being in a particular culture or in an ethnic group.
Okay, ဒါကြောင့်ဒီလူမျိုးတယောက်ဝင်ကျွန်တော်ဒီအာရှသားတွေမှာအဲ့လိုမျိုး stigma ကြီးဖြစ်နေတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့ဟလာအဲ့လိုမျိုးmental health ဟလာ depression တွေဝင်နေစတကယ်ဖွင့်ပြောဖို့ဒီအကူအညီတောင်းဖို့အရန်ခက်နေတယ်ပေါ့နော်
So that's kind of our overview, our summarization of this paragraph, really talking about identifying mental disorder or psychological problems as a stigma, and then talking about how that actually affects how people are seen in society or within particular cultures.
ဟုတ်ကဲ့ဒီတော့ကျွန်တော်ဟိုခေါင်းစဉ်ကိုပြင်ကြည့်မယ်ဆိုရင်ဟာလာ stigma and psychological problem ဟာလာ stigma ကြောင့်ဖြစ်ရတဲ့ psycho နဲ့အုံနောက်နဲ့ပတ်သက်တဲ့စိတ်နဲ့ပတ်သက်တဲ့ပြဿနာတွေပေါ့နော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ခေါင်းစဉ်နဲ့ဟိုစာပိုင်းနဲ့ညီပါတယ်
So going back to our agenda here quickly, and I know that we're well over time, so thanks for hanging in with us, folks. But we were going to do a title reveal and a closeout. But in the interest of time, I'm going to show you what the title is, just so you all can kind of guess at what these two paragraphs, which are clearly related to one another, what the article name was that they're both connected to.
Okay, number 6ကျတော့ကျွန်တော်ဒီမှာ title ကိုပြမယ်เนาะဒီစာကြောင့်ဒီ article ရဲ့ title ကဘာလဲဆိုကျွန်တော်ပြပါမယ်ဒီမှာဟုတ်ကဲ့
So the question is, what might the title of this article be? And we were going to try to have you all answer this, but the title of both of the entire article, which includes both paragraphs, is Stigma and Abnormal Behavior. And this is a great photo that shows someone that perhaps is upset at another individual because they might be having or experiencing some of this the psychological problems.
Okay, the ponlea or Zaga Yan Bioba, not Chilamerson, Hala, the outcap to the not senator, to Hala, Doka, 2 year problem, Young Hala, say Pansanya, Jama, Magong Biomala, Dame Ho, through a mailer, Bowinja, Shoncha, Han, intro, board, intro, Pura, Han, in Kanakana, say out at the Biomala, Moinle. Or say that not jada like a jada de bono, the get into the get in to jada the gate yoga of Kenya, through to a young cat, a paper in China, Maguni, shown Charlie de bono.
And it shows how, like, in a family, because maybe those two are related, there's a stigmatization around getting help for a mental illness. So the person might not be able to seek help or to get assistance in their mental disorder because of the stigma in their family.
Cannot be all the mental health stigma pillar, there are a cuni down will and ketla. The row young Giamed will have bioil, may pay them bioil, Siamarim of bioil. You know, get an apple swear or not the out high to do one bioil.
And that shows how stigma, which is a new word that I hope that we've all learned tonight, is related to abnormal behavior, which we learned is non-normal behavior or functioning in a person.
Okay, Genie, stigma says a long way, it's a long delay, material, you do a team and not young Gibare. A stigma net, the abnormal, tit hala, mama tit behavior, a chinia, sessan agent, or no, okay.
Okay, well, I think I'm all set.
Okay, all right.
I hope you all had a good time and enjoyed this and got something out of it.
Okay, thank you so much. Next, now the web or not, go to who net, Jada the Bay, Jada Bade, Wednesday, Thursday, no, Myanmar Seno chain, Konai Kwe, no, okay, JB Tabat Myanmar. Now, next week, Wednesday net, okay, Thursday, no, okay, Konai Wema, writing class. Sama, no, okay. Along or Tuesday, a lab or dinner and live your Jesu Tenet, do the duele, Jesu Tenet, along Josore, Tangajin, Pure, that, get right, the English never that we got to that station, dangerous, so, comment today, the course, the Tangajin and by Lopiva, now the Bamaleno, okay, Jesu Tenet. Thank you, Nick. I mean, you can head off. You need to go to meeting.
Sure.
Jesus de Mare, Sianek or Jesus well of your Java. Okay, message on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. Yes. Bye-bye.
Great feedback, Nick. Bye.
Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Okay. Major Ali Shilang Diwa. Along St. Piano. Jesus Tene. Bucket Kelly Shilang Diwa. Technical bio Lualo, no? Machada. The cha Nelly. Now the color the Kaja, the Lolo and Gomez around the genuinely be bon.
အဲ့ဒီ comment အောက်မှာဟိုစားလေသူများနာမည်အများရေးထည့်တယ်ဒါပေမဲ့ကျွဲတဲ့အချိန်မှာ10ယောက်ကျော်လို့ပဲရှိတယ်အဲ့ဒါသူတို့မသိလို့လားမသိဘူး
အေးနော်ဟို register လုပ်တာအများကြီးရှိရပြောချင်တာလားဟုတ်တယ်ကျွန်တော်ဟို Facebook ကနေလည်းပြန်ပြီးတော့ message ပြန်ပို့တယ်ဘာဖြစ်လို့လဲတော့မသိဘူးเนาะဟိုနည်းနည်းဟို Zoom ကျွန်တော်ဟိုနည်းနည်း date Zoom သုံးတာတော့ data တော်တော်စားတယ်ဟုတ်ကဲ့အဲ့ဒါတော့နည်းနည်းနားလည်ပေးတယ်ဟိုအဲ့လိုမျိုးအခက်အခဲရှိနေကျွန်တော်ကူညီဖို့အသင်ပါအဲ့လိုမျိုးinternet နဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးတော့ data ကိုမသုံးချင်တာလားဟိုမရှိတာအဲ့ဒါလည်းကျွန်တော်မေးခွန်းထုတ်စရာကျွန်တော်အားလုံးတော့ပြန်ပြီးတော့data တော်တော်စားလားမသိတော့ Zoom သုံးတာများပြီမှာအခုတနားရီသုံးတယ်ဆိုရင်ဘယ်လောက်ကုန်လဲမသိနော်
မတေချာတော့မသိဘူး
တေချာဟုတ်ကဲ့ဟုတ်ကဲ့
1 kg လောက်တော့ကုန်တယ်ဆရာ
Okay 1 gig ကဘယ်လောက်တော့9000တော့1000
1 kg 100 1000 megabyte
ဟိုပြောချင်တာပတ်စံနဲ့ဝယ်မယ်ဆိုဘယ်
ပတ်
လောက်
စံ
လဲ
ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဟွာလေပလန်ကတ်တွေဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တော့ဒါမှမဟုတ်လို့ပတ်စံနဲ့ဝယ်တော့1000ပေးရတယ်ဟုတ်
1000 1000 okay မဆိုးပါဘူးအဲ့ဆိုတော့okay ကျေးဇူးတင်ပါတယ်အဲ့လိုမျိုးအခက်အခဲရှင်းတယ်ကျွန်တော်ကူညီဖို့အသင့်ပါဟိုဒါပေမဲ့ဟိုဖိတ်နောက်တစ်ပတ်ကျွန်တော် writing เนาะဆရာနောက်တစ်ယောက်ပြောင်းမယ်ပြီးကျတော့ speaking နဲ့လာအောင်မယ်เนาะအများကြီးစီစဉ်ထားပါတယ်အဲ့အကြောင်းပြောပေးပါเนาะဒါခမယ်ဒီ course ဟုတ်ကဲ့အားလုံးကျေးဇူး
မင်းချင်
ဟုတ်ကဲ့ပြော
အဲ့ဒီ course ကလေဘယ်လောက်ကြာမလဲ1လလား2လလား3လလားဥပမာ
ကျွန်တော်လောလောဆယ်တော့ဟိုspeaking နဲ့ listening ပေါ့နော်3ဘတ်လောလောဆယ်တော့3ဘတ်အစီအစဉ်ရှိထားတယ်ဟုတ်ကဲ့တခြားကျွန်တော်ဆရာတွေဟို volunteer လုပ်မဲ့ဆရာတွေကျွန်တော်လိုက်မေးနေတယ်အဲ့လိုမျိုးတခြားသင်ခန်းစာလေးတွေလည်းကျွန်တော်စီစဉ်ဖို့ရှိပါတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့လောလောဆယ်တော့အခု3ဘတ်ထိတော့ကျွန်တော်စီစဉ်ထားတယ်ဟုတ်ကဲ့
တော့ပါမယ်ဆိုတော့နေတာပါဆရာ
ဟုတ်ကဲ့အဲ့ကြောင့်အများကြီးဟုတ်ကဲ့အဲ့ကြောင့်လုံးမယ်လို့ကျွန်တော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ဒါဟိုတခုပြင်ဆင်ဖို့လည်းသိမှုလွယ်ဘူးဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့ပြင်ဆင်အောင်ပါပါကျွန်တော်တို့နည်းနည်းလေးအလုပ်များနေတယ်ဆိုတော့ဟုတ်ကဲ့
ဟုတ်ကျေးဇူးပါ
ဟုတ်ကဲ့ဒီအကြောင်းဒီ page လေးဒီ page လေးကိုဒီ page မှာပဲကျွန်တော် notification ဖွင့်ထားလိုက်ပေါ့နော်ကျွန်တော်တို့တခု post နေအမှပဲ post မှာဆိုတော့ဟုတ်ကဲ့
တိမ်မဲ့ချိန်ကပုတ်ဒီနေ့ကြာပါပါတင်နေ့ပတ်တိုင်းမဲ့လား
ဘာဖြစ်တယ်ဟယ်လို
စာတင်တဲ့ချိန်ကပုတ်ဒီဟူနေ့ကြာတာပါတင်နေ့ပတ်တိုင်းမဲ့လား
ဟုတ်ကဲ့နောက်တစ်ပတ်ဗုဒ္ဓဟူးနဲ့ကြာတော့ဘေးမြန်မာစံတော်ချိန်9:00နာရီခွဲဟုတ်ကဲ့နော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့မှတ်ထား calendar မှာမှတ်ထားပေးပါတကယ်ချင်းတော့လည်းပြောပေးပါနော်ဟုတ်ကဲ့တခြားမေးစရာရှိလားမသိဘူးနော်အားလုံးအဆင်ပြေနော်ဟိုမရှင်းတာမသိတာပြောချင်တာ okay awesome okay Jen do you want to say something anything
thank you I don't know what you guys were talking about but thank you for coming I'm honestly just so happy you are here if you need more from us this was our last reading lesson but if you want more if there's something you want to learn more about tell us send us a message and we will try to come up with a lesson even if it's not on Zoom we could post videos so whatever you need tell us and we will bring it to you somehow
okay ဒီတော့ကျွန်တော် message မှာကျွန်တော်လည်းဟို message တာတခါလေးပို့လို့ရရင်တော့ဟို Facebook page ကနေဥမာဒါလေးသိကျင်တယ်ဒီလိုဒီ technically ဟာလာဒီဒါဘယ်လိုဖတ်ရလဲအင်္ဂလိပ်စာနဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးတော့သိကျင်တာဟာလာ lesson သိကျင်တာရှိရင်ကျွန်တော်တို့ message ပို့ပါကျွန်တော်တို့ Zoom မလုပ်ရင်တော့ကျွန်တော် video လေး post ပြီးတော့ဟာလာတင်ပေးတဲ့ video လေးကို post လိုက်မယ်เนาะအဲ့လိုလည်းလုပ်လို့ရပါတယ်Okay အားလုံးရဲ့ data လည်းတော်တော်ကုန်နေပြီဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော် data ကိုလည်းမပြောချင်ဘူးကျေးဇူးတင်တယ်အားလုံး
ကျေးဇူးတင်ပါတယ် thank you so much
thank you so much all right see you next week on Wednesday and Thursday okay 7:30 okayအားလုံးကျေးဇူးတင်တယ် bye bye
bye see you
next week
bye bye